Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me, Player Q, DFS on Twitter. It's Neil Orfield, NC Orfield, 8K, on your DraftKings, on your whatever in your contests. And week 18, Neil, not as ridiculous as most like final weeks of the season, as far as we got like 3K wide receivers to choose from. We got backup running backs that who knows what the split of the backfield is going to be there. Other than the fact that you played a whole ton of Juwan Winfrey.
Yeah. So that was actually a complete mistake. I had no idea how much Juwan Winfrey. So I had boosted Juwan Winfrey and Equanimeous St. Brown up to like 7.4 fantasy points, thinking that I would get to like a couple of shares of each of them. And then as I was going through my lineups, I was looking through. I scrolled down to the bottom of my lineups, like in the second quarter of the first slate of games, thinking, I hope I have a lot of lineups with nobody who started yet. So I was looking at those, and like the first three I looked at all had Juwan Winfrey in them with a 0. And I was like, holy shit, did I totally mess something up? And yeah, I got like 15% of each of them, and that was not by design. They were not plays. Sometimes, as you know, I like to take stands on players that I think the field is missing and that I think have some opportunity to really blow up. This was not one of those cases. This was just a complete accident on my part.
Well, was it due to the fact that when you bumped up their projection just a little bit, like that 3K wide receiver, like if you predicted that Robbie Anderson was not going to play, like Brandon Zylstra would get like an 8-point projection, and then like in combination with like Kupp and Taylor and like these high projected plays, like it made those barbell lineups. We see that very similar to NBA, where you get that $3,200 player that if you just give him another 2 minutes, it's like it wants Giannis plus him over two, like balanced. Like that sum is just slightly higher. That you think that was more of the cause that you're building 150 lineups, and if you're under, especially I look through some of your exposures. Like, you had very little Cyril Grayson. You had very little, you had no Marvin Jones Jr. Like, you had 15% Allen Robinson. It's like there weren't that many, like, $3K to $4,500, like, standout wide receiver punt plays that, like, that little adjustment. That's the reason why you got 30% of those guys.
I think I pretty late was lowering my projection on Deontay Harris. So I think that I had done some runs where I was getting to just a little bit of Winfrey and Equanimeous St. Brown. And I think it was because I was getting to a ton of Deontay Harris. So I think I didn't really factor in that lowering Deontay Harris would also lead me to a lot more of those guys than I wanted. So yeah, I think a lot of things came into play there, and it's a balance. It's always tough with NFL. And I also, that was on DraftKings. I finished my DraftKings lineups, my first run with like an hour to go, and I still had to make all my FanDuel lineups, which I had 300 this week, and then I had to make my Yahoo lineups as well. So it was just ran out of time and didn't really get to look through a final crunch. And then I came back at the last minute, just before lock, because I was listening to shows, listening to what they were saying about Patrick Taylor. And it seemed like everything I was hearing about Patrick Taylor was not, you should play Patrick Taylor. On the shows that I watched, they were saying Patrick Taylor is a reason not to play A.J. Dillon. I think Patrick Taylor's, they're not going to want to run A.J. Dillon much. So they're probably going to be using a lot of Patrick Taylor. So I was thinking, I've never heard anybody in the shows that I listen to suggest that you should play Patrick Taylor. I've just heard it said many times you shouldn't play A.J. Dillon because they're probably just going to run Patrick Taylor. So then I was thinking, I could get Patrick Taylor against the Lions at like no ownership potentially. So I ended up, boosting his projection a lot. In literally the last minute before the DraftKings slate, I reran a crunch and got him in there. But
he was owned. He was
owned. Yeah,
7%
I thought he was
owned.
going to be. I thought he was going to be 2% owned, and he came in a lot higher than I thought he was going to, just based on the chatter I had heard. I don't know. I'm guessing that there were other shows that were touting him, because I heard other people say that they thought about using him in their cash games. And
I used him in my DK cash lineup.
Yeah, so I just
right. If you listen to ATR ETR put Patrick Taylor in the top 5 running back value plays and roto grinders. Like he was it wasn't like, oh my god, this is the free square. It was more of a viable. It only viable because the low end wide receiver range was fairly poor. And like if you're gonna try to make a build with Taylor and Cup together, you may need both a 4K wide receiver and a 4K running back in order to do that. And if Patrick Taylor's going to mix in the first half and then play all of the second half, uh,
Exactly, that's enough.
that's enough for 4K. You
Price
don't
tag.
do you need 30 points out of him? No, he's a 4K running back, right? So I get it, but in the lower stakes contests, like if I go to results DB, the differences in ownership between the Wildcat and the Millie, like anything that was projected sharp, were good plays in the Millie, but not necessarily in the Wildcat anymore. So like we're talking about like Patrick Taylor. Patrick Taylor was 16% in the Wildcat, 7% in the Millie. Like if I go through some of like I'll mention some of these plays, it's exactly like the big disparity between, let's see, like Justin Jefferson was 22% in the Wildcat, but 13% in the Millie. Then Patrick Taylor 16-7. Then we got Keyshawn Vaughn 16-9. Connor 16-10. Allen Robinson 14-7. Marvin Jones 12-7. DJ Moore 12-6. Like I'm naming like Deontay Harris 11-6.
Yeah.
Like I'm naming guys that you
Millie, right?
right that projected well in comparison in the lower stakes that people aren't playing as efficiently. So like in the Millie, you probably should just jam those guys. But in the Wildcat, like I built 8 lineups for single entry and 3 max small field, and of course I played them in the Millie also. I just throw them in. I only played one lineup with Marvin Jones Jr. because I just thought he's overowned. I thought a guy like Brandon Cooks would be overowned. I thought Deonta Foreman would be overowned. So like I was similar. I had similar running backs to you. Dalvin Cook was underowned. Antonio Gibson, James Conner, who I was swapping in. I like left Singletary. It's like Singletary Connor in that flex spot, and it's like depending on the lineup, I could just like flip flop for the late games because there weren't any surprise inactives. I think a lot of people played some emptier early slate lineups under the hopes that there'd be something that we didn't expect, and you could jam in like Eno Benjamin or something.
That's what I was hoping for.
Right, that's what you were hoping for, and it didn't really come out that way. But you ended up with a lot of James Conner, and he did.
It worked out just fine. James Conner projected extremely well for Osimo. I think he might have been like the top projected points per dollar running back in the Osimo projection. So I was going to get a lot of whichever of them was starting, just because.
Right, but you have to, but Neil, you have to understand that the Conner projection was going to be fragile. Like, not only weren't we sure he was even going to play, but even if he did play, was he going to be limited and was he not going to be limited? It turns out he wasn't going to be limited, but like you understand that. Like I think Osimo projected Connor as if he was not limited, while ETR projected him where he was going to be significantly limited, and the blitz was kind of like in the middle. So depending on, like, obviously if you're using Osimo's projections, he was projecting as, I mean, he would have been, and you could say the same thing. Antonio Gibson I played, because everyone expected him to be limited. Like, it's like, what's the reason of running him into the ground? Jared Patterson's there. They're playing the Giants. Just split the load. And nope, Antonio Gibson just played his normal. If everyone projected that at 5,800, he would have been the jam of the slate.
But if you had told me that Jonathan Williams and Jared Patterson would combine for 13 carries, I probably wouldn't have wanted that much Antonio Gibson because they did get a lot of carries. The other two backs, they just
right. But also Gibson got a lot of carries. I mean,
I know, yeah.
It's the Giants. They just ran the ball all game.
Yep. So yeah, I had a lot of Gibson as well. I was nervous about it just because. So they said that they wanted to get their younger guys involved, and I I was hesitant about what they actually meant by younger. I thought maybe they meant more experienced, or like because Gibson is clearly a part of their future. They don't need to see what they have in Gibson. My assumption was that they actually meant we should get the secondary, tertiary guys involved rather than our regular starters, as opposed to actually younger players. But yeah, they played a lot of Gibson, so apparently they meant it.
Looking through some of the other stuff, how did you do overall? I mean, I know you. It looks like you placed the lineup 67th in the
Yeah,
Millie.
I want to say I lost about $500 in the millie. My biggest sweat was in the afternoon slate. For a little while, I was looking really live to win 200,000 in the afternoon slate, and I just needed Stephon Diggs to do something in basically the second half, and he did nothing. And then other people went off just at the end, and I ended up getting seventh with a completely different lineup than the one that I thought was live. So I ended up having a fine day overall, but I think I probably lost a little bit of money when you factor in, because I lost a couple thousand on FanDuel, lost a couple thousand on Yahoo. So I think overall I was down a little bit on the day, but not a terrible day. I was close enough a couple spots.
Yeah, I ended up minus 12%. I
Yeah, I
mean,
think I was probably similar.
right. It really came down to FanDuel. I mean, David Montgomery let me down. Right. I
Yeah,
didn't play much. I didn't play any David Montgomery in my 8 GPP lineups. But I mean, he was a staple of my cash lineup on both sites. And then Christian Kirk on FanDuel. I didn't play him on DraftKings. So it's like I lost a little money on DraftKings. I made a little money on. I swept in cash on DraftKings. Just that
nice.
FanDuel kind of let me down. And then the afternoon slates kind of lopsided. And then I pretty much made all my money back in GPP. Because I came in like what 20 something in the double spy. Like I put in like it was like $1,100 worth of GPP entries, and I got back I think 1,200 total, or 1145, or something marginal, and then it was all the cash stuff, and I won like 70% of my head to heads, but
Nice.
I missed like one or two of the high stakes double ups,
Ah,
but yeah, I didn't play any Jonathan Taylor.
yeah, I played a fair amount. I think I was maybe even above the field slightly on Jonathan Taylor. I get it. I listened to your show this morning where you're talking about the play and that you just preferred getting to expensive wide receivers. And I get that if you're only playing a handful of lineups. But in 150, I mean, I think Jonathan Taylor was live to score 40 fantasy points, in which case you would need him. So I had a fair amount. But yeah, I didn't go too crazy with Jonathan Taylor. Did you play any Alvin Kamara?
No, I was avoiding playing. The Dalvin Cook was the highest priced running back
Yeah.
that I was playing because I had him projected well compared to the ownership, especially in the higher stakes contests. And it could have been Kamara. I think Kamara was underowned also in that range. It's just that I was prioritizing the higher priced wide receivers, or at least the 7K, like AJ Brown and Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, obviously Jefferson and Cup. But I was trying to jam in cheaper running backs like Keyshawn Vaughn, like Singletary, Vaughn, Gibson, Sony Michelle, who did 20 for 39 or whatever. Right? I played Patrick Taylor in two lineups. I prioritize Singletary only because he was in the late games.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like I can make more switches. If I have Singletary and Cup in lineups, it's like I could do anything I want at that point. And then defensively, I mean, I thought the Cardinals defense. Like I played in my 8 lineups. I think I played like 6 out of 8 Cardinals defense because the Browns were going to be so chalky,
They
and the
scored a
Cardinals
touchdown,
were
didn't they?
100 more. Uh,
Yeah.
so like I didn't really worry that much about defense. I mean, you could have gone down to the Dolphins, and they did well, and the Washington football team was fine. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not out of the 8 GPP lineups I made. I'm not, except for one. I fucked up on one. If you take a look in the millie, there's one lineup that I have Kirk Cousins unstacked with CJ Uzama in the.
Huh.
It's a dummy. It's a
Oh,
I got to I forgot about it. Like I was doing my
you know,
lineups and I didn't realize that like I thought that was a Kirk Cousins Jefferson lineup that I made, and then I just entered it and whatever, and it's like why? Where's Jefferson in this lineup, and why is
so how
Uzama in
did that
here?
lineup even get made? Did you just put in random players, or was it like a lineup generator did that for you,
No,
or
no, I
how
just
do you
put in
even get
random
that?
players.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All right.
But
I usually
random play. I'm
try to
talking about
do
like
that.
on Tuesday before, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. You just. I'm gonna put some whatever it show. Typically, I change the quarterback in whatever lineup just so I can say, oh, this is my cash lineup. This is my this DG people, and they're highlighted by quarterback, so I know which ones are which. So I don't change them all the players in the lineups, but just that one. I made a Kirk Cousins lineup, Cousins Jefferson Conklin lineup, and I thought when I saw Kirk Cousins that lineup was already made with that was that lineup,
Okay.
and it
Okay.
wasn't. So technically, I only made 7 GPP lineups plus that lineup because I
Yeah.
thought that was a lineup that was already made, and it cashed, and it actually and it
Oh
cashed in the
well.
middle,
Nice.
right? It cashed even with the Uzama zero that I don't even think he played.
Yeah, I have no idea if he played.
Right, I wasn't
I
caring
wasn't.
about
I
the
wasn't
Bengals
playing.
anyway.
Yeah.
But we're done with football. I mean, I didn't have a good football season.
I did only because of Showdown and Yahoo, but otherwise on main slates it was pretty. I had weeks where I got close, like I felt like I played relatively well for the most part, but yeah, you need one to break through, and on main slates on DraftKings and FanDuel it just didn't happen for me.
Right, saying neither. I mean, I played the single entry three max mostly, and it's like I think I got a 17th once. Or I mean, I didn't. Obviously, you need to win something. I mean, like it really
Yeah,
comes down to you just like one of these lineups needs to win something, and
I
it
mean,
didn't.
I
Right.
mentioned the one that I thought I was going to win. I was live to win 200,000 yesterday. Ended up in seventh place. That was 4,000. So
Right.
it's more top heavy than ever.
But now we're getting into basketball.
Yeah, you
Now,
ready?
how do I prep? Okay, you're gonna have to teach me because I haven't played NBA DFS in over 2 months, in about 2 months
Okay,
maybe. What should my prep? This is what I plan. Okay, let me tell you what my plans are.
let's hear it.
Okay, and you tell me if this aligns with what's going on in NBA DFS. I'm just going to play like maybe 10 to 20 lineups.
No, you're already off. You got to play 150
No, why do I have to play 150?
because it's more fun.
No, it's not more fun.
All right, it's more fun for me.
I'm
All
gonna
right, go
no,
on,
I
go on.
play 10 to 20 lineups, large field
Yep.
contest. So play the main GPP, but play 10 to 20 so that I don't have to have a major rebuilding process like every half an hour, where it's less like let me just play the best 10 lineups that I can at 6:55 p.m. and then yeah, I mean yeah, I'm only investing if it's a $15 contest. I'm only
Hmm.
investing $150, so 150 to $300. So
Sure.
nothing. So if for whatever reason, like I miss something, oh this guy's in and this guy's out, and I miss it. Like what's the worst case scenario? I don't have a portfolio of 2,000 to 3,000 lineups.
Yeah, but regardless of how many lineups you're playing, the biggest edge in NBA DFS right now is reacting to news, usually after lock. So I feel like that's you're going to want to be at your computer anyway, and you're going to want to be paying attention to news if you're planning to be a plus EV NBA DFS
Yeah,
player.
but I could do that in 10 to 20 lineups easier than I. That to me,
Yeah.
I could take advantage. I'll take advantage of the same edge, but in 20 lineups rather than having to worry about rebuilding 150 of them.
Okay. Well, you were just talking about not paying attention to the news and skipping out. So
No, but I'm saying, but what's
that
the
was me.
worst? If I fuck something
Yeah, yeah.
up, what's the worst thing that happens is that I lose point nothing something very smaller of my bankroll than
Sure.
1% of my bankroll.
Well, so for me, in NBA DFS, more so than any other sport, I think, I'm mostly focusing when I'm creating my player pools, I'm limiting the number of players I get from one team, but I'm mostly, especially on larger slates, focusing on just getting exposures to players that I like, exposure percentages to players. I'm not focusing as much on individual correlations within lineups. Maybe you are, and that's why you need to limit your number of lineups because in NBA DFS you're focused on maximizing your correlations and the EV of each lineup, whereas I'm just throwing 150 out there and I'm focusing on getting exposure percentages that I like for individual players, and I'm limiting the number of players I get from certain teams. And I set some groups to make sure I don't get, the starting and backup center from the same team, that kind of thing. I set some groups, but for the most part, I feel like it's easy to just use late swap optimizer and I can change my 150 set pretty easily. I don't think it takes that much more effort.
Well, it takes
But
more
maybe
effort
I'm
from me because I mean I factor in what the point totals they're at already. Like the only time I ever use a late swap tool for, I mean, understand that typically in NBA I never played 150 to begin with. I would play 60 to 80, you know, some $1,000 worth of entries or something like that. So if it's a $15 contest, I'm playing like 60 entries. And the only time I would use the late swap tool is if something happened enough where I want to jam in guys. Like where something happens, 7:30 news comes out that in the 8 o'clock game, X, Y, and Z are out, and this $4,200 guard is like is median is 10x, and it's just like whatever lineup he could fit in, just fit that. I don't have to worry about caring about Like I don't want to worry about caring about exposures and stuff like that. That if there's something worth playing, I'm probably going to try to play them in all of my lineups or as many of my lineups as possible. And if there's nothing like that, then I don't want to use a late swap tool because then now I have to decide on how much of this guy do I want? How do they fit into these lineups? And then I end up not playing it. It essentially screws up the leverage of my, like I've always found with late swap, other than the times where I'm just jamming a guy, that if we knew this news beforehand, the guy would be 80% owned and he's going to be like 22% owned. And it's like, at this point, I don't even care about anything. So I build my lineups in a way where it's like, the reason I'm playing X, Y, and Z together is because the total lineup ownership works out that lineup is properly leveraged for the contest. And then once I start using the late swap tool, like that, all that type of stuff kind of gets thrown out the door, and I end up with lineups where it's like, yeah, you got more of this guy, but then you got the 4 chalk players together in that lineup also, and it's like at the end, I would look at my lineups I would look at my 60 to 80 lineups at the end of doing a whole ton of late swap throughout the course of the night, compare to projection, and go. Had I known this information when I'm late swapping, like half my lineups are like end up being almost too chalky, and then half my lineups end up being like almost horribly projected because it doesn't have any of those guys. It becomes this, it separates like that. And I feel like I can control that better with 10 to 20 lineups because worst case scenario, I could just do everything. I could just go through, just like I did this past slate with James Conner. It's like I got Singletary, I got Cup, I go through the lineups and go, okay, I'm going to move this guy down, move this guy up. I got Conner there. Okay, go to the next lineup. It's like 8 lineups. I mean, I did that in the span of like 4 minutes for NFL. So in NBA, 20 lineups I could do in any type of situation where it's like, oh, now this guy opened up. He's a little bit better value. He's not the greatest value, but the better value. And then I just start, and then I go, well, if I'm going to play that guy, like, I don't need to now play the contrarian stud. I can now move to James Harden in the guard spot. And then, like, it feels like I can control that better. Whether or not that control is worth anything is subjective. Like that.
I'm guessing that your 10 to 20 lineups are more positive EV than my lineup set. But then, I mean, we had this conversation the first time I was on your show. You said that you kind of consider those dead lineups just loss leaders, and that's kind of how I approach it. Like, sure, I'm in my 150 set. I probably am making some negative EV lineups, but I'm going to be able to throw out more positive EV lineups by throwing out 150 and just using the late swap tool. And I mean, you sound like you're only making late swaps if there are big edges to be had, but I feel like
I make late swaps. No. I make late swaps all the time.
Okay.
But the problem is that every late swap that I make in a late swap tool, the lineups get further and further away from the projection versus ownership that I originally was intending for. That's why it's like I started to do less late swap and use late swap more for Jimmy Butler and Adebayo's, like everyone's out for a team, and it's like now it's just like everyone's the best value.
Yeah.
And then I could just say, just give me as much, whatever lineups it could fit in, just give me all of it. And then I don't have to, because I don't have to care about the ownership. I know they're going to be lower owned than they should be because it's late news. And I know that they project to be the best values on the entire slate. So like, to me, the efficient ownership is near 100. So if I get 100, so I don't have to, I don't have to care about any of the other, whoever fits in the rest of the lineups, fuck it, do that. That's perfectly fine. But I feel like in NBA, that's not common. Like stuff opens up, but you don't get those jam type of players.
A player projected for 22 and now he projects for 25. And
right.
I feel like it's easy for me to take advantage of that, little jump with late swap. I think it's easy enough to do, but I get it. You want to make the most positive EV lineups possible, and I'm more willing to accept that some of my lineups are going to end up being negative EV, probably too chalky. But I'm still factoring in. I factored in the ownership in creating my original sets and in altering projections before lock. Typically, is where I do most of my altering of projections to factor in where I want my exposures to be relative to ownership. And then after lock, it's generally easier because I've got those changes are still there for the guys whose projections were already set, and then I just need to change the team that we got news for. I just kind of go through that one team and look through their
Okay,
projections.
so it's a little bit easier because you're changing the actual projection of the players.
Right.
So you're
Yes.
manipulating that to begin with.
Yes. Yep. So I guess that's just the way I play NBA DFS is also, I think, pretty unique, different than most people. So it makes it relatively easy to do late swap too.
Right, because I'm not manipulating the player projections, I'm manipulating the ownership projections.
Yep. Right.
So for me, I need that field, and then if I try to late swap and I say, well, I want to change all my lineups, but I don't want to have a lineup that has more than X amount of ownership, I start getting fucking gets fucked
Yeah.
up very
And
quickly.
I don't do anything with that. I don't do anything with making sure individual lineups are under a certain amount of ownership. I just make sure I get exposures that I like and assume that the optimizer is going to give me enough positive EV lineups.
Okay. But you can see my
But
point of view. I mean, my point of
yeah,
view is just I'd rather have 20 great lineups than 150 lineups and hopefully 100 of them are okay.
yeah, right.
And scattershot and whatever.
I understand. I do
Right.
understand what you're trying to do. You're making the most positive EV lineups by looking at each one individually, which is what I used to do. And I mean, I used to put a lot higher percentage of my lineups into the top 1%, but I'm more profitable now
Right, in
because
raw money, you're more profitable.
in raw money, I'm more
Right.
profitable. So that's, yeah.
Right. And in MLB, I don't mind doing that. Like MLB, I'll play 150, no problem. I mean, because even if you are late swapping, you're playing teams. You're playing combinations of 4 and 5 guys. It's not one of
I
these.
hate late swap for MLB. I wish I'd have all the lineups ahead of time for MLB. It's the most frustrating thing when things change or lineups come out different than projected in MLB because it's a lot harder for me to late swap. You find it differently? You prefer late swap in MLB?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't mind late swapping in MLB,
Okay.
but I typically do my late swaps in MLB manually.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you. I don't know. Like even if I'm playing, obviously we're talking about the West Coast teams, right?
Yeah.
The Dodgers lineup. You're playing a ton of the Dodgers,
Angels a lot of the time. Yeah.
right? And then a lineup comes out and it's like, Chris Taylor's in and not whoever, and there's a different price and right a different. Will Smith's not in. It's Austin Barnes
Right.
at catcher, and I have out of 150 lineups, I have 12 Will Smiths, and it's like. Instead of me rebuilding all of my lineups, I just load my lineups in and I just go sort by Will Smith lineups. And I literally just Will Smith to Austin Barnes because I still want to maintain the Dodgers stack.
You might have to teach me how to do that, to switch to search by lineups. Are you talking about doing that within DraftKings or FanDuel? Or
No, I do that in Lineup HQ in
Okay.
Roto Grinders. So you load it in and you just click on the guy's name and it just shows you those lineups that are there. And then I could click the manual swap and go swap. Will Smith is 4,600 and Austin Barnes is 3,100. So it's like, okay, and now I have $1,500 left. And then it's like, what's my one-off? Oh, I have a $4,200 one-off. Well, I could bump him up to Juan Soto at 5,700. Boom, done. And I go to I just go to the next lineup and next line and take out Will Smith. And maybe this lineup doesn't have Corey Seager or something. Okay, let me switch out the shortstop, and now I have the cheap catcher in there. And
I think you actually just solved the problem for me. I think I know how to do it now.
Okay. You could
Lineup.
probably do that. Fantasy Cruncher, you could probably do that that way,
I
right?
can totally just sort by lineups with that player and then delete all the other lineups for sure. So it should actually be relatively easy.
I mean, I find that easier than trying to rebuild the lineups.
Yeah, for sure.
And then also, once you start rebuilding the lineups, everything you planned in the beginning gets all fucked up anyway, right?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you have 60% of some fucking pitcher but that's the only way you could fit. Once you could put Austin Barnes in and you have $1,500 left, it's now not giving you the $7,500 pitcher, it's giving you the $9,000 pitcher, and you're like, why do I have this much Dallas Keuchel or something, right? But to me that's the problem. To me it's that.
Yeah.
Like, and in NBA you're going to be doing that. Like, to me every time you do a late swap of all of your lineups in whatever tool you use, it tends to get further and further away from the original like strategy that you were using on the slate to begin with. And to me, you're compounding things. Now, obviously, if you're jamming in guys that are underowned and their projection goes up, you're making up a lot of that because a lot of the field isn't late swapping enough for
Right.
those guys. So your projection is getting higher on these lineups compared to the rest of the field. But
Yeah.
I feel as if the I feel like I'm out of control. Like by the time I get to the end, I've had NBA slates. By the time I get to the end, I have no idea who the fuck's in my lineups. I just like
Yeah.
I don't even know what's going on. And then like I originally had like 20% of some guy, Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal goes off for 72 points, and I go, where's my Bradley Beal lineups? And I have him in 2 of 150. I'm like, how the fuck did that happen? It's because he didn't project that well to begin with. I was playing him as a leverage play, and now that the optimizer is just trying to jam in projected points, unless I specifically went in and say, leave me with at least 20% Bradley Beal, it's just going to go, fuck you. And by the time you get to the end, it's like, if I would have left my lineups the way they were, they would have been better. Right?
Yeah.
Or if I would have just went in and manually, and like if I knew my Beal lineups would end up not non-existing anymore, I would have just gone in and just manually swapped. And once I think like that, I'm like, imagine trying to manually swap 150 lineups. I can't do that, but I could do 10 to 20.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get that. And I mean, over the course of the evening, you can eliminate the games that have already started. So you're only looking at a certain number of players. You're only looking at the players remaining. And I'm still doing the same math of checking their exposures or their projected ownership versus what I am getting to and making the decisions of, am I happy with this? Do I want to jam in a player? So I think the math for me kind of stays the same. Eventually, I do start sometimes looking at individual lineups, and if I'm doing well in the early slate, in particular, if the players that I need to do well are already doing well, then I drastically, I lowered my randomness a lot, so I'm just getting to the top projected lineups essentially. And if originally I will have said I want to have at least two different players in each lineup, so each lineup has at least 2v2 difference. I'll take that away at the end to just kind of, if I'm doing well, to make sure that I'm getting to the best possible lineup. So I think that I'm still playing the same way. I'm still making the same decisions of where do I want my exposures to be versus ownership as the night goes on. And of course, the ownership is going to be less correct throughout the night
Right.
after a player's ruled out and stuff. But then I guess that's when I start doing my own mental math of what is it actually going to be here and what do I want to be at. But
In a weird way, I'm trying. Most of the stuff that I do in DFS is to be directionally accurate.
yep,
And in this case, I'm leaning towards the precise side
right,
while you're doing the direction. Like me,
yep,
I'm going, well, what you're doing is directionally accurate, but
right,
not as precise as what I'm doing in
yep,
10 to 20
exactly,
lineups. So
yep.
like should I, even if I've just played 20 lineups, should I just be just doing that process and just screwing it?
I mean, if you can, why not hand build them? Why not go through individually and change each individual lineup?
It's a pain.
If you
I
got
mean,
the
that's a
time
pain
for
in
it.
the ass. NBA DFS is
Yeah,
a pain in the ass to begin with,
it
right?
is. It's a pain in the ass, but it can be a lot of fun if you have a sweat. If you have a sweat and then you win.
Well, obviously,
It's
that's
not fun
always
to
a
have a
lot of
sweat and
fun.
lose. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I guess that's the only real
But
fun
I'm
in the
dreading
NBA.
it. I'm not playing tonight, but I'll probably play Tuesday night.
Okay.
Uh, I'm dreading it.
Yeah, it's very different than NFL in a lot of ways that I can't quite pinpoint, but it feels different to me. It feels more. I mean, it's a lot more chaotic for one thing than NFL, but yeah, it's less stressful for me actually. I think than NFL DFS is because
Why?
NFL DFS, I don't know, because I feel like NFL DFS, I'm making adjustments and like thinking a lot more deeply. I think because the projections are better for NBA. So I think NBA, I rely a lot more on projections, and NFL, I rely a lot more on thinking harder about what the field's going to do and where the projections might not factor in uh, some decisions that might be made and some things that could happen. So I think because the NBA, I rely on the projections more. I think it's less stressful for me.
How would you classify MLB though? I consider MLB the
Oh,
least stressful.
I agree, 100%. MLB is super easy.
And no,
Yeah,
MLB, I feel like I could show up 10 minutes before the slate and build
Yep,
150 good lineups.
I've done that. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if they're all good, but yeah,
Right, but I'm just saying I
yeah,
feel like I'm not stressed out. I mean, why am I bothering looking at a slate until like most of the
yeah.
lineups are in and
I don't until the last hour before the slate
right.
starts. I think typically. Yeah.
And then you're just playing teams, and then it's just like
Yeah.
I'm playing teams,
Yep.
and it's just like I want a bunch of these, 5-man, 4-3-1s, and whatever comes out. I don't want this much of this pitcher and that much of this pitcher. I condense my pool and just like run it, right? Just
Yep.
like uniques, 3 or something like that, and just fucking whatever the fuck I get, and then upload it, and there you go. NBA, NBA, dude. Whatever I do, like whatever I do at 6 o'clock is going to be. I may have to redo at 6:30. I may have to redo at 6:50.
Yep.
7 o'clock hits, and then I may have to redo stuff at 7:30. You're in a constant state of what do I have to do.
Yep.
In MLB, it feels like I could do that all at once in about 15 minutes, maybe max.
Yep.
And then
Occasionally there'll be a lineup that comes out late that you didn't expect, but yeah.
right. But I don't even mind because worst case scenario, a global swap. Right? Because especially with batters, like it's not linear based projections. It's not like the NBA where it's like, well, a guy at 4,200 has a certain value. It's like, dude, anyone could go 0 for 5 in any baseball game. So
Yeah.
if you played if Will Smith is in your lineup and now it's Austin Barnes and you just want a global swap and leave $1,500 on the table, that isn't that big of a deal in MLB DFS, right? To leave that much money on the table. In NBA, you probably don't want to leave that much money on the table.
No, yeah, it's rarely going to work out in NBA.
Right, so you're not going to be doing those swaps. So like there have been plenty of times the Angels lineups come out and it's like Justin Upton isn't in. It's like and he's like 3,300 and it's like guess I'm playing Juan Lagares instead in all those lines. It's just like as long as what are the Brandon Marsh or whoever. It's like yeah,
And
but
on
you're not
FanDuel, you can even swap above the salary.
right.
It's super frustrating for me on DraftKings that you can't do that. If you do have salary left on the table, you can't swap from a $3,300 player to a $3,500 player. But that's neither here nor there. Just a frustration of mine. But I find it's just as easy to just go in and do late swap typically.
Even with just a one player swap like that? I don't want it to rebuild all my lineups.
Yeah, no, I guess you're right. I do that sometimes. I do some where I go through and individually.
Because let's say in that specific case, you went in and said you X'd out Will Smith and Austin Barnes has the check mark and has a 5.8 point projection, and then you say like I still want 15% Dodger stacks. Like it's gonna change all your line. I mean it's gonna change everything that you just did. I mean it's gonna change everything.
Yeah, yeah. In MLB, I am more likely to just make that swap. Although sometimes you can't swap within the same team, I guess. So those are if it goes from you were projecting Austin Barnes to be in, and then Will Smith comes in, that happens occasionally where you can't do that, and then it might be worth it to use late swap optimizer. But yeah, you're right.
But even now, I'll find another punt catcher. So I have now it's a 4-3-1 lineup instead of a 5-3 lineup. I mean, to me in baseball, the thing is that in baseball it doesn't matter as much, right? In NFL, you would never okay, I'm going to swap this guy out and now not have a stack. That doesn't make any sense.
I'm just playing Kirk Cousins with CJ Uzoma, for example.
Right. That's exactly right. Exactly. That's what I write. Yeah. Naked Kirk Cousins for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right.
And I think the late swap in NFL is less stressful because it happens at one time. Like this past slate, 7 games and then 6 games. A lot of times it's just only 3 games at the late set. But it's kind of like you don't have to. It's not like every half an hour, or every hour, all this NBA news. It's like, okay, the game's at 4:25 Eastern, which means the inactives come out at 2:55 p.m. And I get to see if James Conner's in. I get to see if Robbie Anderson's in, and then I don't even have to rush to my computer. It's like, let me wait. There's still the third quarter's going on in games, so it's like I don't know what I need to late swap in any of my lineups until I see what the hell happens. and then at
Yeah.
like 4:15 you could do it, and you have all the information at once, and you have all 6 games to swap to, and then you could just do it like that. To me, it's less. You consider it more stressful?
Maybe it's because I'm more emotionally invested. Now that I'm thinking about it, it shouldn't be more stressful. You're right. It should not be. It's probably because I'm sweating the games as I'm doing it in the afternoon and just leading up to lock. I'm also doing, I think, more lineups typically for NFL. Like I said, I
You're
think,
doing
3
multiple
under on
sites
FanDuel this
also.
week. Yeah, I do FanDuel, I do DraftKings, I do Yahoo. I try to do Super Draft. I try to chase that overlay. I usually miss by like seconds, but I try to add in Super Draft last minute. So, yeah, that's probably part of it. Just that I'm doing so many lineups and trying to, make stacks, and then am I going to run out this quarterback naked? Am I going to require 2 pass catches with this quarterback? There's just a lot more rules for me in NFL, like stuff that I have to do manually than in NBA, where if I didn't change the projections at all, I would probably not lose much of my EV. It was, just make 150 lineups based on good projections. You can still do fine, probably.
Yeah, but as far as the stress is concerned, I would consider that at least in NFL you're doing it all at once.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you just do like it. I don't mind if I had 150, a million lineups, 300 lineups, multiple sites. Like compared to NBA, like in NFL, I have no problem. Like I have no problem. Like okay, let me sit down at 4 o'clock. I have a half an hour or whatever time, and go. Okay, let me take care of my DK lineups. Late swap, late swap, late swap. Rebuild. Let me take a FanDuel, late swap, rebuild. Like, go like that, and then it's like once I'm done with that, upload the thing. 425, done. But like NBA is like dude, I've had nights where I've uploaded my CSV 12 times.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, 12, like legitimately 12, not like, well, I'm second guessing. Like, legitimately, it locks, and then at like 7:05, some news comes out, and I'm like, well, this 7:30 game is starting, so now I got to redo this, and then at 7:18, another piece of news comes out. It's like what I just did, I need to redo again, and then upload it by the 7:30 game, and then by 7:50, Paul George may be sitting. It's like, okay, well now I got to set up that like. And it's just by the time you get to the end, I'll go on the pregame show in the morning, and people are like, why'd you only have 12% of that guy? I have no idea. I can't even answer this goddamn question.
I know.
I have no idea. I don't know why my exposures were the way they were. I have no fucking clue. The only exposures that in the 7 o'clock game is the only thing that I could explain because they got locked immediately. And then people say, oh, you weren't concerned that you played X% of the guy in the early game because you were waiting for news. It's like, waiting for news? We didn't even know 3 of the things would even happen. So, I wasn't able to swap to that guy because I had so much Malcolm Brogdon in the Pacers game or something like that. But outside of that, it gets to the end, and I'm like, why do I have 26% Damian Lee? And I'm like, I don't know. Because he fit in the small forward slot, and I was trying to jam in this other guy in. Yeah. And he fit. And he fit.
That happens to me too.
Right? And you have 26% of a guy that's like 2% owned.
Yeah.
And they're like, what did you see in Damian Lee? It's like originally nothing, because originally I had 0 of him. I did not even have any of him. Right? And I ended up with him in now a quarter of my lineups, and now I have to explain on a morning show why that happened. It's like, well, that's what happens when you late swap 12 times in a night. And you're stuck with the Warriors at the end and a small forward spot you need to fill. And then just like whatever 4K small forward fits, that's what it gave me.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you. So just don't do a morning show so you don't have to explain yourself. It's a lot easier that way.
That's the answer. Yeah. Don't.
Well, then I come on here and you ask me about my Juwan Winfrey, so I guess I'm feeling it now too.
Yeah, but you at least acknowledged that it was a mistake.
Oh yeah, it was just an error.
Right.
I mean, I played JaMychal Hasty on purpose, so
right. Well, that at least that makes sense. It's like, okay, you explained that. But the fact that you had 14% Juwan Winfrey and 16% Equinemi St. Brown, but like that's 30% of your fucking lineups.
They're probably in some lineups together.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Maybe not, because I didn't do any Packers stacks or Lions stacks, so
right.
It could have just been totally different lineups. Yeah.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing that stresses me out.
Yeah.
Of like how have 30% of my lineups that I can't explain why they look the way they do, and if you looked at them, you'd be like, I wouldn't have played this lineup. It's like, well, you played 30% of them. I mean, like,
Well, I also and I got to those guys because I did want to have some of them. So like I didn't think that they were dead plays. I thought there was some potential that, the Packers would sit Devontae Adams and just play the backup receivers. Because sometimes teams like to do that. You know, give the backup receivers some run with the starting quarterback, or vice versa. Give the backup quarterback run with the starting wide receivers. So I thought that there was some potential. And then we got the news that MVS was sitting, I believe. So there were, they weren't complete dead plays. They just were plays that I wanted to have 4 or 5% maybe, and not 15%.
right. Yeah, you had no Alan Lazard.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
The one that I wanted. Yeah.
Oh,
No, I don't know
did
if I
you
had
actually
anything
did you want
right.
Alan Lazard?
He put up 24 fantasy points.
I know, but
No,
you
no,
had
no.
zero. I'm talking about
Yeah,
originally.
no. I was not targeting him at all.
Oh, okay.
But the one that I should have targeted, or Josiah DeGuerra, or whatever his name is,
Oh,
also
the tight
scored a
end.
60-yard touchdown. Yeah, that was frustrating.
But it seems like you have no problem like saying, "Oops, that was
Yeah.
an error," and just moving on.
Yeah, loss leaders.
Yeah, that's it's hard for me to go. I have lineups that I know are bad that
Yeah.
I just make or bad. Like that's why I'd rather have 60 to 80 lineups that are good.
I mean,
And
it's
if
funny. It kills me if I have a player who's actually out. Like if I play a lineup and then the player gets hurt on the first play of the game, that I really dislike. Or if like accidentally have a player who is ruled out, that really bothers me. But having too much of a player that I think he could go off at no ownership, that doesn't bother me as much.
yeah, it bothers if I'm doing something that I don't realize that I'm doing.
That
It's
you
like
wouldn't
an
advise somebody else to do. Yeah,
right. I would right. I like I if I because I could just look at a singular lineup and go, is this a good lineup for this contest? And if my
yeah,
answer is no, then like why am I playing this? Like then why am I playing it? Like the whole point of using a tool like Lineup HQ or Fantasy Cruncher or whatever is for efficiency to build the lineups that you would have built yourself. Just it's easier to build 150 quicker this way. But if you looked at each individual line, it'd be like, okay. Like you'd some of them you'd be like, I never thought of that, but that seems pretty good. That seems pretty good. And maybe there are some lineups with Juwan Winfrey that are like, well, you needed a 3K punt, and why not take a shot at 1%
right.
owned? Okay, but if I looked at that lineup and it had Juwan Winfrey as well as like three other 1% owned guys, and like I would look in and go, well, why am I doing this? Like, why don't I play Cooper Kupp in this lineup? Why am I playing Jamar Chase in this line? Why am I doing all this in this one particular lineup? And then I was just like, that lineup I don't like. And then once I go through them, this is what I mean by NBA is that like when I would play 60 to 80 lineups and I would look at some of them at the end of doing a bunch of late swaps, I look through and it's like half my lineups. I'm like, if someone asked me if this was a good lineup, I'd tell them no. Like objectively, like, yes, all the players individually are fine, but in this combination, if I would have known all the information I know now at 10:30 Eastern, whatever, when the last game locks, like I wouldn't have played this line. I wouldn't have made my lineup look like this.
Yeah,
Like, but in the very beginning, like I can make my lineups look whatever way they want, and I feel much more. If I do it manually, I don't get in those positions where I have lineups that look like cash lineups and lineups that look like they're 38 points off the fucking optimal, and it's just that because I'm building that to me that's what happens is
yeah,
that the lineups start getting I have a projection versus ownership range that I have in the beginning, and then as I late swap, like I want all of my lineups in this little range, and now I end up with almost no lineups in that range. I have 40 lineups above it and 40 lineups below it because I'm jamming in stuff up and down. And then I look at both. I look at out of my 60 lineups, I'm like 50 of them suck. It doesn't matter what the results
yeah.
were. I just look at it objectively and
This is a
go
bad lineup. Yeah.
right. It's either overowned or
Yeah.
underprojected.
And I think that sometimes I can somewhat control for that just by paying attention to the projections as they were. So I pay attention to where Osmo's projections come in at and the salaries. So like for example, if there's a player that was 3,200 and Osmo hasn't projected for 8 fantasy points, and then Juwan Winfrey is 3,000, I won't project. I'll try not to, and I mean sometimes I will, but generally, if I don't want a ton of Juwan Winfrey, I'll still project him lower than the guy that Osmo has higher projected,
Right.
or that's more expensive, so that I'm still going to typically be getting more of the higher projected player, unless I don't want to do that. And then typically I will only get to Jawan Winfrey if I don't have enough salary left in my lineup to get to Deontay Harris or whoever the
Right.
player is that projected a little bit more at a little bit higher. So typically, the first lineup that will be created will have the higher salary, higher projected player, or just if they're the same salary, the higher projected player, the player that Osimo has higher projected, or the one that I'd rather get in there. I will project slightly better. So typically, I'll be getting to him in the lineup, or I'll be getting to the Jawan Winfrey lineups in the lineups that also have Cooper Cup and the players that are projected the best at the top. So I'm always paying attention to making sure that the best plays are still the top projected as I am adjusting my projections, so that I don't run into the issue as much of just getting random 100 different 1% plays that don't project well. Because
Right.
it's the optimizer is still going to be trying to give me the top projected lineups. So
Right. And I'm hacking through that by using ownership for that purpose.
right, yeah,
Because obviously the lower owned players are typically the lower projected players also. So
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
so right. So if I don't want, if for whatever reason, like let's say there's some chalky player, some player that projects well that I want less of, like you on your end, if you wanted less of them without having to tweak exposure percentages, and you just wanted to get less of them, you'd decrease their projection by 2 points.
Yep,
And that means
exactly.
you'll get less of them. What I would do, if I were to hack that way, let's say he's projected 22% owned, I'd bump him up to 28% owned, which means I'll get less of him because now I'll start getting less of him because now he becomes more over-owned, which
Yep.
means he doesn't fit into my range of lineups less because projection versus ownership. So we're essentially doing the same thing.
Yeah, we're just coming at it from different directions.
Coming at right from different directions. But I try to keep the ownership as I try to be as accurate as possible with the ownership, and
Yep.
that's where me not getting Jonathan Taylor in any of my lineups is because I had Jonathan Taylor compared to ownership. I had Cooper Cup more under owned than Jonathan Taylor,
Right.
and they're both obviously different positions. But I had running backs like Cook, Gibson, Michelle under owned at running back, while Jonathan Taylor I didn't have as like totally over owned, but there were so many running backs that were under owned, and Cooper Cup at 9,700 I had as under owned, which means if I went through lineup HQ, like that's why I don't get like I build 50 lineups and I get no Jonathan Taylor because I'm looking for a certain ownership range, and it's like, well, I'm going to give you Keyshawn Vaughn and Antonio Gibson and Cooper Cup because that has a higher projection for X ownership than Jonathan Taylor plus some under-owned wide, so Tyler Lockett or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I'm getting certain. But you could understand that in your case, doing late swap would work more because you're just altering the actual projections,
Yeah.
and you're not building lineups based on any type of ownership range. Yet it could be completely fucked up for me because if I keep the ownership range the way it is, it's going to try to jam in stuff that who knows what the hell is going to. Because it's like, well, you're trying to now jam in a guy that's 7% owned, right? Because now this new value play comes up, and he's originally projected to be 1% owned. And now I'm like, based on this late swap, I think he's going to be bumped up to, let's just say, 15%.
Yeah.
So now it's going to say, well, now that you've already gotten this guy at 15% ownership, it has to jam in to fit in within that ownership range a lower owned player. And those lower owned players at this point, now that half the slate is gone, may be 5 or 6 points lower projected than what it would have been in the beginning of the slate with more options. And now I'm starting now now you can see by the end of it.
Yeah,
like,
that would be a lot tougher.
Right. So in order for me to not have that not happen, I have to remove the ownership range. Now, once I remove the ownership range, I start getting those way too chalky, way too low projected lineup. So it's like when I'm doing everything very very much based on total lineup ownership, it makes obviously now you can understand why I have a much more frustrating process with late swap than you do because you're just like Once lock hits, ownership could mean no fucks to you, and
Right.
it's just like whatever it jams in, and just give me the highest projected lineups at this point,
Exactly.
and hopefully everything works. And hopefully
Right. Well,
everything
depending
works
on who's
out.
breaks. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But I used to do it a little bit more your way. I would change project. Because I think worrying so much about exposure percentages, especially in late swap, like it breaks everything. Right? Imagine trying to have strict exposure percentages on 60 different
Oh yeah.
players. Like it
Right.
just can't. It can't mathematically do it. I don't know what happens in Fantasy Cruncher, but in Lineup HQ, it'll just say I could only build 93 out of 150. Like I'm.
Yeah, yeah. We get if you set your rules to restrictive, the same thing happens.
Okay, but I think a
It's
lot of
pretty
people do that. They go, I want to use all the 8 million settings that I had, and then do late swap on this. And it's like mathematically, it can't give you any of that based
Yeah.
on the current way that your lineups are set up. Right? Oh, I want to jam in all the Kevin Durant now. It's like, dude, you have 80% Giannis. You can't do that because
Not gonna work.
it's not going to work. It's not going to allow you to do mathematically. You can't do that. And I think that's where, that's where things go wrong. But since I'm focused so much on the ownership, I'm more likely to get. I've done that. Like that's why it ends up. It's like, okay, I want to still within this strict ownership percentage, and I have 80 lineups, and it goes could only build 22. Like, why the fuck can it only build 22? All I'm doing is trying to jam in this guy. Nope, sorry, I can only build 22 because it doesn't have the players to fit in. And then I'm going, okay, let me increase the ownership range. I can only build 48. And then eventually I have to take it off, and then it's like, just fucking do something because I got 3 minutes, right? Just fucking, I don't care. Just give me a bunch of this guy and fucking move on with my day. And then at the end of the day, Bradley Beal goes off for 80 points, and I have none of them. And I go, what? That was the main thing that I had in my lineups, and now it's gone.
Yeah. That's how happened to me last week with Rashad Penny. I really liked Rashad Penny last week. Had a ton of my lineups and then late swapped. So I mean I guess it's not the same thing that happened because I used a completely different process, but just that I lost a lot of a player that I really liked because then I forget who it was who became a great play because it was kind of unexpected to come in last minute and then nobody had him. So I was like, okay, I'll just go with the guy who projects extremely well now that nobody's playing. And then of course it didn't do that well, and I lost on my Rashad Penny who went off. So that was frustrating. Anyway,
No, last week wasn't it?
Was
Wasn't last week what? Was it Chase Edmonds?
Yeah, maybe.
What was last
Was
week?
was it James Conner ruled out or?
Yeah, it was Chase Edmonds because James Conner was ruled out.
Okay, yeah, that's what it was.
And some people planned on that and then he only got 10 points.
Yeah,
and Rashad Penny had like 30, right?
I had a ton of him because I think it was also just me being my lineups are kind of dead anyway, so I didn't give it as much thought as I might have otherwise because I didn't have. Was it the Bengals stack? I think it was the Bengals stack that week.
Yeah, Jamar Chase had 50 plus points.
Yeah, so it was
like you're not going to win without him, so fuck it. Right.
So I'm just going to go with high projections, and Chase Edmonds projected way better, so I was just like, screw it. I'll just, rather than like lowering his projection like I normally would, so I wouldn't get to 70% or whatever, I was just like, I'll just go with it. I don't care. But then in doing that, I lost all of my Rashad Penny, who was a play that I was really on going in. So that was a frustrating slate, but sort of unrelated to what you were saying, other than just late swap optimizer taking away the play that I really wanted. Does happen the way that I play too sometimes.
Right, and you could avoid that, but if you just have individually said, I want to make minimum exposure 20%, it's just that a lot of times you're not.
You can't do that in Fantasy Cruncher.
You can't do that in Fantasy Cruncher?
Yeah, there's no minimum.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's something that Lineup HQ has that Fantasy Cruncher doesn't have?
There is. You can.
Oh, you mean they did? You mean they didn't just copy the code, right?
Apparently
what
not.
an asshole.
I want to no comment this one.
Right. At least it's not Saber Sim, right? Because that obviously they must have copied all the code from FC in order to get that tool, right?
Yeah. Well, Saber Sim. So I don't actually follow all the optimizers. Saber Sim, I think, is based on actual I mean, I guess it sounds like it's in the name. They do run actual simulations, and they.
Yeah, but only for their projection. I mean, like you can't import your own
really?
and run your own simulations.
Okay.
That's what I want. That's what I told Justin Freeman. What I wanted. You make that, and then you fuck everything up.
Yeah.
I want to be able to run my own simulations of my own projections.
That'd be cool.
There, right? You understand? Like I want to be able to put in, like if I put in the blitz projections, and I go pull in all the blitz projections with the floors, the ceilings, the percentiles, and everything, and the correlation coefficients or whatever the fuck, and then give me a contest and go, okay, here's what I put in the ownership of this contest, and I want you to simulate the contest 10,000 times, and then show me the line, and then show me the lineups and everything, and then I get to pick my lineups, which shows the highest ROI. I mean, like, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I don't want the game
mean,
simulation. I don't give a fuck about the game simulations.
That's what a lot of people do, though. Isn't that? I
Yeah.
assume that's what like Whistles Go Woo does and Brick and those guys do.
Yeah.
That essentially. And Nerdy Tenor, I think, said that on your show that he essentially
Right.
does that. Yeah.
But some
Yeah,
type of
that would
process
be-
like that where I could run a simulation of the. I don't care about running a simulation of the games. I care about running a simulation of the contest,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then being able to put in like my owners, like I don't want it. To, oh, this is what we project. It's like, well, no, I think this guy's going to be twice his own. So like, obviously, none of these numbers match. Like I could look at Awesomos, the boom bust, for instance, on the boom bust thing.
Right.
Like I look at that. Some people sort by the leverage column, right? They go, okay, who's positive leverage, negative leverage, but all it's doing is comparing the top optimal percentage to the Awesemo ownership percentage.
Right.
But I'm looking at the Awesemo ownership percentage, and this guy is 12% owned. And I go, no, I think he's going to be 18% owned. And now that he's 18% owned, he's actually negative leverage. Right, exactly. Right. So it's like you got to look. I don't mind looking at Alex's simulations, right? Because he's using it based on his projections. I don't mind that. But it's like I need to compare it to the ownership that I actually think it's going to be, and then judge it by that. So that's why I do look at those types of tools, and a lot of times the awesome ownership is directionally accurate enough on the high and low end. Like he had this past slate that Foreman and Singletary were massively negative leverage at running back, and I had that originally. I mean, he actually had Singletary lower owned than what he actually came out to be. Yeah. And Foreman and Singletary both even lower owned, and I thought they were massively over owned at that point. So it's like I'm in agreement. Like, but once you get down into that like -3 to +3 range,
right?
It's like tough. Yeah, if you think a guy's going to be 12% owned and also has him at 6% owned, it's like, well, it's not positive leverage anymore. It's actually negative leverage now. So like,
yeah,
right?
That is and I do that. I probably talk about it too much. I think on the shows sometimes. I mean, as you mentioned, my catchphrase is that's what the tools say, and I probably because sometimes it is that little bit of a difference, and I can say this player looks like a good player because he's projected for 5% ownership, but he's optimal 7% of the time. But it's such a slim margin sometimes that it's like, how accurate is this really?
Right. Well, I mean, but the concept of what you're saying on the show is accurate.
Right. Yeah.
But you could judge it either way. You're basically judging optimal percentage versus ownership, and and that's why I tell people on my shows, it's like I think this in NBA, I think this guy's going to play 34 minutes, not 30. So fucking change it, right? So right, I think the ownership's going to be 12%, not 6%. So change it.
Yeah.
Right. So just change. If that's what you think, then just use that number. Then all you have to do is so. But when you say like, oh, a guy's going to be 5% owned, he has a 7% chance. It's like, well, if you think he's going to be 10% owned, then he's negative leverage. I mean, like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, right, like, but the concept of what you're saying is how you should be viewing it,
right?
Whether or not you trust.
People are learning how to think about these things,
right?
At least from the way I talk about it,
right?
And I also often say, watch the shows tomorrow because things change. Sometimes things will change really drastically from when I do a show on Saturday versus Sunday ownership projections. So. Yeah.
Right, like I thought Marvin Jones would be even higher owned than what he was, and he still was over owned. So
why was it because of his bonus? Bonus?
That was right. That was right.
I actually thought about it. I thought, yeah, I could see them force it, but he only did like 4 receptions, so I was like, how much is that going to really do for him? I don't know. I thought about it a little bit, but yeah, I didn't get to it.
No, I just thought it would be typically those types of things. It's a group thing. Like I typically whatever the industry's talking about, I like it's not like he projects for that. I mean, he projected okay, right? But I'm just saying I don't think he should be 15% owned, right? Right. You look at that and you go, why am I playing a 15% owned guy like that, right? Based on some incentive type of thing. It's like, oh, you got to play Cooper Kupp. He's going for the record. Well, no, you got to play Cooper Kupp because he's the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Because he's Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. Right, because he's Cooper Kupp. You got to play Justin Jefferson because he's going for the franchise record. Like, no, Adam Thielen's out, and they're playing indoors against the Bears. Yeah. Like, that's why you're playing Justin Jefferson. I really don't care about any type of incentive, right? Rob Gronkowski, oh, he's going to make sure to get him his incentive. Dude, they have no Chris Godwin. So they're playing the Panthers defense.
I guess these are all places where you get to them anyway. I factored in a little bit. Like so Stephon Diggs I thought was a better play yesterday because he needed 6 receptions for a big bonus. It was like, so his floor is pretty much 6 receptions. I mean, really, they're not going to let him not get to 6 receptions. Of course, if it's 6 receptions for 20 yards, that's not going to get you anywhere. But he's also Stephon Diggs. So I give a little boost in some cases based on some of the incentives. If I think the incentive is realistic and within their control, then I can factor it in a little bit. But yeah, generally, you're not going to play a bad play because if he puts up 150 yards, he's going to make a lot of money because that's just probably not going to happen.
Right, but most of the time those incentives are reflected in ownership. It's already controlled for that. Like that's how I view it. Is like whatever bonus that you think that you get in the projection because of that is typically over projected in the ownership. Like that's like on any other slate, Marvin Jones would be 6% owned.
Okay, but Stephon Diggs yesterday was 6.9% owned in the Millie, which to me is
that was a good no. If you were playing the Millie, I thought that was good. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But understand that Justin Jefferson projects much better than him for not much more money.
Yeah, true. Justin Jefferson was also only 13.6% owned. So
right, well that's what
I don't think the narrative got out of hand. At least in those two examples.
Well, it depends on what you were doing. I think a lot of people were paying up for Jonathan Taylor and that they couldn't get to those guys. Sure. But I'm saying Justin Jefferson. If Justin Jefferson is 13%, he was the most under-owned wide receiver on the entire slate. So why would I play Stephon Diggs at 6% owned? Like it comes down to the context of who else is available.
Yeah, always.
If Justin Jefferson was 22% owned and Cooper Kupp was 34% owned and Stephon Diggs is 6% owned, now I'm more on board to be playing Stephon Diggs because it's dramatically different than the better options that are now at over-owned percentages.
Right.
But this is the way that I play. You just type some buttons in and just whatever the fuck comes. Juwan Winfrey, who gives a fuck? It just comes out.
Yeah. They'll give me something good.
You're the people. You're the person that people complain about on Reddit.
Right. If you play 150 lineups, or you mean who would play? Nobody would play Juwan Winfrey on purpose. Those people.
No. Or Danny Amendola, right? Did you play any Danny Amendola?
I didn't play any Danny
no.
Amendola.
No, but I'm talking about on the threads of like I don't want. You guys just punch numbers in and trust what a computer says. And set out a bunch of lineups and make a lot of money. And anytime I look at those threads, I go, then why don't you do it? Isn't the point of this to make money? Isn't the point of us to? Well, I'm not going to just trust what a computer says.
Right.
It's like even though all the top players that make all the money trust what the computer says, I'm not going to do it out of what spite. And I never understand that. But I'm saying I'm kind of pushing back on that with the late swap stuff of I'm kind of saying it's like, you're just going to push the late swap button and trust what the computer says? I'm going to go to individual lineups and make sure.
Yeah.
But you're also pushing buttons and then realizing that you look at some of your lineups and go, nope, that was an error.
It's not like I just press the lineup and then let it go. I press the late swap, click the late swap button, look at the exposures now. Okay, do I like this? I'm still thinking about it. But
you're letting the computer think about it. We're not going to let our computer overlords tell us what to do.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty smart. I don't know. At some point, we're just going to have to submit. I think
to the computer overlords.
Yeah, at some point, right?
Right. You just wake up in the morning and you press the optimize button.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, maybe. I mean, once we get that tool that you're talking about, the run the sims based on my info.
Right.
At that point, you would, right? You just let the computer tell you what to play, right? You're not going to give it much more thought than, of course, you're creating projections and stuff. So I guess that's not really.
Oh, I thought you meant for life. I thought you meant I'd run it and be like, you're going to have breakfast at 9:32 in the morning. You're going to have 2 eggs, and it's just going to be whatever the optimal that my cash lineup, my day-to-day cash day-to-day lifestyle lineup.
we've got at least a decade before that's the
No,
case.
people know it's going to happen. According to anything in technology, everything's going to happen next year. The metaverse, it's coming. 3 years,
That's true.
right?
I have no idea what that is, but I'm looking forward to it.
Right.
The metaverse.
Understand that in like 1960, people said 3 years, flying cars, right?
Yeah, right.
That hasn't happened. When do we get our flying cars?
Do we want flying cars? Like, why do we want flying cars?
No, flying Ubers. We don't have to own
Yeah.
them.
Unless they can automate. Like, I don't want to be in a car with drivers flying throughout the air, unless the cars themselves are driving themselves in the air. Then that'd be cool.
Yeah,
Sure.
but we go on planes. Isn't that what a plane is?
Yeah, but this would be a lot more of them, like probably around the same altitude at the same time. So it's a lot more dangerous if there are people actually controlling.
You think it's just going to be the rich people on those flying cars?
That's good point.
Right.
I mean,
remember?
it's not a real concern that I'm bringing up here.
Right.
This isn't something that keeps me up at night.
Right. Like they're planning on opening a space hotel for people to get on the rocket. Like yeah. Because normal people are going to be able to do that.
Yeah. Right.
All hail the computer overlords when they come. Hopefully they don't come for DFS soon. But
Hopefully not.
Neil, just a programming note. This show's not going to be like every other week because, I mean, you can tell just from our conversation. Once NFL is over, like what all we're going to do is bitch and moan about NBA DFS late swap every week. So figure during non-football season to just do a show every other week. So it'll keep those complaints to a minimum. And then we'll get baseball back in the beginning of April, right? At the end of
I'm gonna play a couple MMA slates.
Oh yeah, you're gonna play some MMA?
entertaining. Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. I'm more excited. This is how horrible NBA DFS is. Come March, maybe I end up playing spring baseball, spring training baseball more than NBA DFS.
I have not gotten into any of the spring training or summer league. I've never played any of that stuff or preseason football. So I don't know why. Maybe I should. It sounds like people who actually like really pay attention to it. I played XFL, which is probably actually the best, the closest to one of those because I was finding beat reporters myself and seeing what they were saying about is this player going to play? Because there's no like one place where they tell you all of the information like other sports. So I guess maybe that's the closest I've been. But I can't get into the spring training and summer league if I have other like real options.
Real options.
Well, I guess what I mean is big prize pool. They don't typically
Right. It's not big prize pools. You're right.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if there even is a baseball season.
Exactly. That's a good point. We might not have it.
Oh, that would suck to have to continue to play NBA DFS, even late season NBA, and then the playoffs. Oh, I may quit DFS at that point.
Yeah, I've never actually gotten into NBA Showdown, which this year I love. Like I didn't love NFL Showdown until this year. Now I'm super into it. So maybe that'll be the next thing for me, getting into Showdown.
No late swap in Showdown.
That's true. Makes it easier.
Okay. Right, makes it easier. So Player Q DFS on Twitter, and with the NFL season coming to an end, are you going to be doing NBA stuff in Osimo?
I don't think so because just my schedule doesn't work out because I can't do live before lock with trying to make all my lineups and we'll see. I'll be doing stuff with Osimo. I don't know if I'll be doing NBA stuff. TBD.
Right. To be determined. But you could always go to osimo.com and find that information. Also, if you subscribe to RotoGrinders Premium, I don't know if people know that I have a featured channel in the Discord called Blender's Game Theory, where I answer and we talk about strategy and stuff, not slate specific. And every week or so, I do a private group coaching calls, and we get on Zoom, and people ask their questions and talk about stuff and their own personal play. People bring up screenshots of their Excel stuff and Roto Tracker, and if you want to participate in any of that, it's essentially private coaching, but in front of the group. I mean, like, there's 40, 50 people in there, and you go one by one. You sign up on a little form, and we talk for 30 to 60 minutes, whatever.
Do people have to pay for this?
Well, you have to be a RotoGrinders Premium member.
Okay.
So as long as you have a RotoGrinders subscription to any one sports, combo sport, you're part of the Discord. So you don't pay extra for it. Just it's
Nice.
it's a value add for that. So if you want to, because people don't show up for the pregame show, And I try to answer questions in the YouTube chat, but if you want something much more in depth, much more personalized, that would be the place to go. So if you sign up for RotoGrinders Premium, go to rotogrinders.com/discord, and that'll take you into the Discord. And I always post, and the new, every week or so, the next group coaching call, what the date is, and the link to the Zoom and everything. And none of them are recorded, so you could just feel free to vent and tell me all your secrets, and then no one knows other than the people in there. Because some people are not as transparent as us, and they don't want everyone to know what their results are and their financial situations are. But in order to give good advice, you kind of have to know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so until next time, remember, every other week now. So we'll see you in 2 weeks on another edition of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass that you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com.